Welcome to this session focusing on sacroiliac joint pain. Sacroiliac joint, a little bit of an enigma, but it's actually really very close to the psoas as well, which is a muscle that inserts the lumbar spine, connects in. You've got the major and the minor into the pelvis and into the thigh bone. And we've also got the quadratus lumborum, two muscles that come down the side of the spine to support us as well. So we're going to take a little bit of movement working with all of them. Some movements to stretch and alleviate tension and tightness in this area, and some movements to hopefully strengthen as well. Please do take this all at your own pace. We're only going to be taking 4 to 6 breaths with each shape we come to, each alleviating stretch or movement. But sometimes our bodies just say that's enough after a couple of breaths, or maybe the shape that I'm guiding you into just doesn't feel right. So really tuning in and listening to your body, this idea of interoception, listening to our internal dialogue and the sensations within ourselves so that we can best guide ourselves safely. So I've got a few props today to work with. It might be that you improvise. I've got a tennis ball, so something similar if possible. I've got a stretchy belt here. You might have a band. You could be using a scarf as well. A scarf would work really, really well to tie around your thighs. It could be a dressing gown belt, something like that. That would be really helpful. Here I've got a yoga brick that I'm going to have between the knees, but you might find that you've got something a similar width, and we're looking for something about hip width. It could be actually a football. That was something else I've seen it guided with. So hip width is where our iliac crest, these frontal hip bones are. So something about that kind of width would be really useful to be able to grip between the knees or the thighs. And then I've got one of these soft balls, and I realise not everyone has them. So again, there's a bit of improvisation here. It depends on a balloon. A balloon can work if the elastic side of it or the kind of rubber side of it is strong enough. Otherwise, you could perhaps use a slightly bigger ball than a tennis ball, or something that you can find that will work for you. So those are the props that we're going to be working with today. And actually, we're going to begin with the tennis ball. So I want to come to lying down on my back, semi-supine shape. So feet are flat on the floor, probably about hip distance apart, so big toes almost tracking with the hips and the hip bones. It's not an exact science, just a felt sensation there. And I'm going to use this ball to relieve some tension from the glutes. So our glutes, these buttocks here, biggest muscle in the body, they hold a lot of tension because they do so much for us. So, you know, we're using them at walking, standing all the time for all the movement we do. So this can be really helpful just to release here. So I'm going to place the ball underneath my left glute to begin with. You may start with your other side. And you'll notice I'm just gently rolling the ball around. So I have had clients use golf balls for this. Golf balls are very hard. It can be much more tender. Tennis ball tends to have a little bit more give, as it were. Sometimes you can get the kind of spongy foam balls or the spiky balls. So just making sure whatever you're using isn't causing any pain at all. There's possibility of easing out tension through the larger muscles in the body. And then when you're ready, changing sides. You may like to allow your body to settle a little here. And sometimes just doing one side, you'll notice one side of your body suddenly feels lower on the floor, just as you've allowed the muscles to melt and to soften. Taking your time when you're ready to change sides. Mindful that each side could be very different. So just as we're right-handed or left-handed, we're likely to use one leg more than the other. We'll have a habitual side or a more dominant side. So you may find that your right side is tighter because you use that a little bit more. You might find your left side is tighter. But taking your time to gently alleviate. And if you find a knot, if you find a bit that would be good just to find stillness in doing so, but most importantly, making sure you're still breathing. If you hold your breath, maybe it's just a little bit too sore, a little bit too deep. So when you're ready, slowly releasing the ball, placing it down wherever feels
close or nearby, easy to pop down. And we're going to have our feet flat on the floor still, our semi-supine shape. And we're going to come into something called a shugal, something I learned from a wonderful yoga teacher, Donna Fari, who's based in New Zealand. So what we're going to do is we're going to gently push into our feet. And that's all we're doing. And we'll feel the movement travel up the body. So as I gently push down through my feet, I can feel the movement traveling up through the legs. And it's almost as if my body's moving, very small movement, but up and down my mat here. So there's a couple of reasons this is really helpful, very gentle movement for the hip, the lower back as well. But also a reminder that everything is connected. So that when we push into our feet, that small movement is traveling all the way up the body. You may find you can feel the movement almost to the top, the crown of your head. So just as connective tissue in our body, when we stretch a certain area of our body, sometimes we can feel the benefits of that stretch or the almost reverberations of that stretch somewhere else in the body. Coming to stillness when you feel ready. And then we're going to begin to take a twist. And I've got a couple of cushions here, pillows, because I'm going to begin to extend my legs away, create a bit more space for my legs here. I'm going to take my right leg across and gently bring it over. Now, I can decide how far I want to take this, but maybe quite like a bit of a cushion under this thing. I don't want to go quite as deep to the floor. So you'll know and you'll feel how it is in your lower back and your hips and your glutes here. From here, I'm going to take my arms into a T shape or a kind of cactus shape. See what best supports your shoulders here. Maybe you take your left hand to gently apply a little bit of pressure to the outside of your right thigh. We try and avoid the joints, just because the joints can be quite fragile. We need to look after our joints. So maybe that offers a little bit more of a stretch or a sensation of a stretch. Again, just taking 4 to 6 breaths here. In your own time, gently releasing and coming back to center. You may like to come back to the semi-supine, or sometimes known as constructive rest. It's a good kind of neutral shape to come to. And then changing sides. So we're going to begin to change sides. If you think you might like some support, you could take the cushions to the other side. If you have some, slowly rolling the bent left knee across. And I'm actually going to use just one cushion on this side. My left side's a little bit less tight. And then dropping the upper shoulder, maybe the arm extends, or there's a cactus arm, what feels best for you. It could be a little bit lower. And then perhaps you bring your right hand to gently apply some pressure to the outside of the left thigh. When you've taken your 4 to 6 breaths, or perhaps you're taking just 1 or 2, gently easing out. And maybe bringing the feet back to our semi-supine shape. And you may like to give the knees a hug a little bit here, just sometimes quite comforting, but also a softening and a releasing through the lower back, the lumbar spine. So this is where we're going to use a scarf or an elastic band or belt, something similar. In an ideal world, I'd have everything nearby that I could reach. I'm just going to get up and find my props again. So just here, I've got my elastic belt. You may be using a scarf. And I have my feet again in this constructive rest shape, this semi-supine shape. And if you're tying a belt or a scarf or something similar, tying it to be about hip distance. So we want our feet or our big toes to be tracking roughly the width of our iliac crest, these hip bones here. And we're going to place our hands down beside us. And you can take as many as 4 to 6 rounds if you'd like. We're going to be pushing up through the feet, lifting our hips and our pelvis, but at the same time pushing against the belt. 1 or 2 may be enough. So see how this feels for you. And you may find you need to adjust your feet. Sometimes the closer in the heels are, I sometimes use this measurement, my fingertips reaching my heels, that just gives me a little bit more control. So bear that in mind as you come up. There shouldn't be any pain or strain in your knees at all. If there is, try bringing your heels a bit closer into your glutes. So in your own time, pushing through the feet and reaching up, and then slowly rolling down. And as you take that first round, notice if there's anything you need to adjust, whether that's the foot position, the width of your belt, the prop you're using, and then slowly coming into a few more rounds if that feels okay for you. So if you'd like to integrate your breath here, you could be breathing in as you take the movement and breathing out as you gently lower down. And it doesn't need to be too high. We're not looking for an extreme movement. Just beginning to strengthen some of the muscles in the legs. You may even find your glutes turn on. Well, when you've taken no more than 4 to 6 rounds here, taking some time to rest, you might like to release or remove the prop you're using. And taking a few breaths to allow the muscles to soften and to relax. Next, we're going to have something between our knees. So this could be the football. This is where I'm going to use my yoga block or brick. It feels a bit wide, but actually if you do have one of these, they're quite good because they've got different widths. So instead of that width, I'm going to use that width there, slightly narrower. I'm popping that between my knees, but something around that kind of width so that you still have your feet hip distance apart. And once again, we're going to use exactly the same movement, but this time instead of pushing out into the scarf or the belt we were using, this time we're gripping whatever we have between our knees and our thighs. So taking your time to gently lift when you're ready. And once again, this first round, a possibility of just feeling into how this is for you. You might know that one's enough. You may find that you want to adjust your feet a little bit as well. Making sure your feet are parallel, a sense that your toes are pointing forwards. And once again, taking no more than 4 to 6 rounds. You could be integrating your breath, breathing in as your hips rise up, and breathing out as your hips lower down. And always finding your own rhythm here. So whilst I'm practicing this so you can hopefully see and understand the movement that I'm guiding, making sure that you're taking the movement to your own speed, your own rhythm. Once again, I'm coming down to rest for a moment, allowing the sensations of the movement to settle, to soften. Then we're going to take some time to gently roll over onto our front. So rolling onto our front, we're going to begin in something called crocodile. So it might be one that you're familiar with, Makrasana. But just take a moment to tune into our diaphragmatic breath. So crocodile is hands stacked or forearm stacked. It depends on how your lower back feels. The head, the forehead is resting on the arms here. If forearm stack feels a bit too strong, then maybe the hand stack, and that feels a little bit gentler for your lower back. So making sure this feels okay for you. So often we see Makrasana, the toes turned out. Actually, that's not something my ankles are very happy doing. So I like to have my feet extended, making sure however your feet are, legs can relax. There's a bit of a gap between your legs here. Breathing in and out through your nose if you can. Beginning to focus on the breath just for a moment here. And it can be really helpful to turn on our diaphragmatic breath here. So as we breathe in, we can feel our belly pushing into the surface beneath us. breathing out, we can feel the belly softening away from the earth. So this possibility of breathing in, belly pushing into the surface beneath you, and the ribcage expanding at the same time, so signaling a diaphragmatic breath, and then breathing out. Belly softens and ribs shrink back. Taking another 4 to 6 rounds here in your own time. And then when you feel ready, we're going to begin to find something like this prop here. And so these are one of these balls that you can inflate. And this is an 18 centimetre one. It's quite deflated, as you can see. And I'm going to place it just under my hip bone in this kind of crease where my leg joins my hip. So I'm placing it under there. And actually to have the leg, to have that under there, you can then decide what you're using, if it feels too big or too small. Perhaps you could use a small face cloth or small towel rolled up into a roll. That can be helpful. And I'm going to actually turn my head here, mainly so you can hear me on this video. I'm going to use a bit of support under my head. And I'm going to begin to just explore a little bit of movement. So actually this is half frog in yin yoga. So maybe this is where you come to. Knee could be in line with your hip. It might be a little bit lower. And we're going to just find 4 to 6 breaths here. Once again, welcome to take just 1 or 2, or maybe it's more helpful to gently bring a little more somatic movement. So this kind of coming in and coming out. So deciding what feels best for you here. And when you've taken your 4 to 6 rounds, beginning to slowly remove whatever you have under your hips and releasing the right leg back and away. And you may like to come back into crocodile if that felt okay for you. Just noticing what feels different. Sometimes, again, as we did with that first movement with the tennis ball, we take a movement on one side and we can feel an immediate difference. I can feel that my right hip almost feels closer to the floor than my left. So we'll take that on the other side in your own time, using the ball under the left hip, almost that join or crease where the leg joins the hip, and then finding your version here of a kind of either moving frog slightly or maybe just a very still frog. And just out of coincidence, I've got a blanket here that feels quite nice under my knee. Maybe you're coming through a little bit of movement. If you did turn your head in one direction for the first round, making sure you turn it in the opposite direction for the second round. And then when you've taken 4 to 6 rounds, perhaps you've come out a little bit earlier, removing the prop that you're using, and maybe coming back to crocodile if that feels okay. You may prefer to come back onto your back and come into constructive rest. So taking these first few breaths here after finding that shape to allow your body almost to recalibrate, to settle. And the half frog movement that we use there, or shape that we use there, you could do that without anything under the hips. But I know when I practiced this with Donna Fari, there was a sense of a little bit more release of having something in the crease there. So worth exploring both possibilities. We're going to take one final movement here, and this is the one that actually is going to work our quadratus lumborum. So this can be quite hard work. I'm going to roll onto one side. I've come onto my left side here, it doesn't matter which side you start with. Really important to have the legs at a right angle, and actually our head to be level with our heart, particularly if you suffer with any dizziness or if you have POTS. So I'm going to use an extra cushion here to make sure I'm fully comfortable. Even a hand under the cushion feels good. And it's almost as if my knees and my feet are glued together. My knees are going to stay glued together, and I'm going to lift the top leg. It might be a little less than me, it might be more than me. And I'm going to aim for 4 to 6 rounds here, but 1 or 2 might be enough for you. So this is something that's actually beginning to engage. You might find you feel it in the hips, but also the muscles in the lower back. When you've taken the number of rounds that you feel works for your body today, once again, taking rest, taking your time. And then you may just be able to roll over to the other side. I'm going to change directions, come to the other side of the mat in case it's helpful for you to see me. I'm rolling onto your other side. So I've come to my right side, you might have started on the other side. Once again, a right angle here-ish, never a perfect right angle. Knees and feet glued together. And then taking your time to lift the top leg. So the knees stay glued together and that top, almost calf to foot area is lifting up. I'm mindful that this side may feel very different. So I know my right side feels a lot tighter, this feels a lot easier on this side. And working with that, it might be you take a couple of less rounds on one side compared to the other. There's no right or wrong, it's just making sure that you are feeling into your body and offering your body what it is asking for. When you've taken the number of rounds that you feel happy with on this side, taking your time to roll back into our constructive rest shape. So this shape is really helpful for allowing the lumbar spine, the lower back, the deep abdominals, psoas muscle, and even the sacroiliac joint to rest here. It can feel nice to have something on under your head as you come to rest. Maybe you take a few breaths here or begin to find a shape for relaxation or shavasana if that's where you are coming to. If you're coming out, or when you do come out, making sure you do so carefully, rolling to one side and using the momentum in your hands to gently come up to sitting. So I hope that has been helpful. Just let me know how you get on with that. Any comments, please do ask questions as well in the chat below.